Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Graham. Alongside me is my co-host, the Juice, Dave Sadler. We have a huge story to talk about on this week's show, and it involves I guess now former UFC lightweight champion, Mr. Jon Jones. And, of course, there was a pay-per-view this past weekend up in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, UFC 186. We will break down that as well on tonight's Beyond the Cage PM edition.
PM edition. I'm on first shift. So, get to hang out with the kids, get the gym knocked out. It's only 5 o'clock. How about that? When you said big story, I kind of assumed we were going to talk about Mayweather-Pacquiao, but I guess that's not actually big enough for this show.
Or somehow Rick Story just gained 50 pounds and now he's the big story.
Or he's 7-1, the big show.
Could be. I apologize if you hear me coughing during this week's episode. I'm a bit under the weather, but I'll try to do my best not to cough because no one wants to hear me cough. I don't want to hear myself cough. In fact, I don't want to cough at all, but I will do my best to try to cover up and cough off mic. So just bear with us, folks, here today. It's PM edition. So we were doing it's like the news. We had the AM, Beyond the Cage, and we got the PM Beyond the Cage. So
yeah, you need some Gatorade. That's what you need.
I had one earlier. I might have to go run
I
back
have
to
this.
the store.
I have this one. It's Gatorade Frost Glacier Cherry.
Never had that one. I'm partial to the grape. Some people don't like the grape for some reason, and also their grape is misleading because most of the time it looks navy blue, and grapes are purple. So you can very easily go, oh, this is some weird blue one, not grape. But you got to notice that the grape is actually navy blue.
Yep.
It faded in the sun. That's how I got that way.
Or the bright lights of the gas station.
Right? Yeah. It's not UV protected museum glass on those cooler doors.
Right.
All right, enough shenanigans. Let's get to Jon Jones. And speaking of shenanigans, that's what Jon Jones was up to this past weekend. I'm sure you've all seen the report, but just in case you haven't, here's kind of a list of what happened to Jon Jones here. Let me pull that up. Okay, so early this past Sunday morning, Jon Jones was charged with fleeing the scene of an accident. He reportedly ran a red light, hit another car, which happened to be driven by a pregnant woman. The woman sustained a broken arm as a result of the crash. Jones allegedly fled the scene on foot before returning to his car to get cash and then left again. Jones was then identified by an off-duty police officer. A pipe containing marijuana was found by the Albuquerque police when they searched Jon Jones' car. Authorities were unable to make contact with Jones for more than 24 hours until a warrant for his arrest was issued Monday afternoon. He turned himself in on Monday night and was briefly held at the Bernalillo County detention center before posting $2,500 bail. He appeared at arraignment court on Tuesday, but not enter a plea agreement, and his second court date has not been filed. Now, that's kind of a rundown of what happened, but in terms of the severity in the law, before we get to the punishment handed out by the UFC, because the woman he hit suffered a pretty serious injury, the hit and run is upgraded from a misdemeanor to a felony charge. So that's one thing. Two, obviously they found drug paraphernalia in his car. And three, he obviously fled the scene of a crime. So there's three things going against him right now. Before we get to the UFC thing, Dave, is this something, maybe the severity of it, the way it went down is a shock, but in terms of something crazy happening with Jon Jones that appears to be drug related, I don't think that part's shocking to me, but just looking at the rundown events, what was your take on it?
First of all, if you want to do stupid things, if you're rich, and obviously Jon Jones is loaded, if you want to do ignorant things, like, get your smoke on or get your cocaine on or your drink on, whatever you want to do, don't you have some member of your family or your entourage that could drive you around in this instance? Like, you know what? If you're going to smoke weed, do it. But don't risk everybody else's life because you're a moron, You have enough money, get a driver. There's no sense for you to drive. And the other thing I saw that I know we're going to talk about the UFC's punishment, but Dana tweeted out, John's been given multiple chances, when he had lots of different shortcomings. And this was this was kind of the final chance. So it kind of forced their hand to do something. Going to rehab for a day doesn't fix anything. And the UFC had to take the steps that they were going to take.
Now, it wasn't cocaine, it was marijuana, which, excuse me again, which we've discussed several times in the show. Not a severe drug. It's legal now in 3 states in the U.S. It's decriminalized in over 20 states. That's not that big a deal. But we said this earlier when the cocaine test happened. And the fact that, his own mother was like, oh, that was a blessing in disguise. He has a problem. He needs help. To me, that is a sign of a drug addict. It's not just simply cocaine. It's drugs and alcohol. It's a whole mixture of things. The guy he has a problem with those substances. And some of those substances happen to be illegal, which is even worse. So he clearly needs help. It's unfortunate that the help he needs results of injuring a pregnant woman. Now, I haven't seen anything about the woman losing her baby or anything like that. I'm pretty sure if she did, I feel like that probably would have been reported. Maybe not, but I feel like that would have been mentioned in the report. But still, something that could have still drastically changed that woman's life, but could have severely changed it. Now, I don't have kids, but Dave does. I mean, I'm sure that's something that you never want to imagine is losing your son or your daughter. And obviously, this woman could have lost her son or daughter before she even had a chance to get to know them. That might have even been worse.
Yeah, which goes to my point of, where was he going? That's the stuff that's ridiculous. Like, if you have such a big house and all that kind of stuff, do your stupid stuff and stay at home. I don't know. I was talking to a couple people at work, and it goes back to something that we mentioned when he had the cocaine test. Remember the UFC, Dana always tells the story. Porn was on pay-per-view, but the UFC couldn't get on pay-per-view. Jon Jones has now put the UFC in a bad spot twice with the cocaine test directly after, 3 times that I can think of. What about when, he said all those derogatory things before the ESPN interview? You remember all that? And
right.
He's supposed to be a role model, and this is his third offense, I guess you could say, in the last year and a half. And it's it's stupid is the right word. It's just stupid. The Fertittas have put a lot, and Dana White have put a lot behind getting this to where it is, making it as mainstream as it is. And then this this child, for lack of a better expression, can basically assist in flushing it down the toilet with his antics. So I think they did the right thing. They've even removed him from the pound for pound and the light heavyweight ranking list too. So
now the UFC, one of the first things they did was suspend him indefinitely. Now, I think they're going to wait till some type of punishment is handed down by the state of New Mexico, whether that's going to be a fine and community service, whether that's actual jail time, house arrest, mandatory rehab, whatever the case may be. I think whatever punishment is doled out, that's when the UFC should issue their suspension limit. Now, and the suspension should start after he's done with any of that time. It shouldn't start because obviously if he's doing jail, community service, house arrest, he can't fight anyway. Right. So there's no sense of starting the suspension when any type of punishment time starts. The suspension should start when all that's done and he's technically a free man again. Now, whether or not that actually happens, I don't know, but that's how I would handle it.
Yeah. I read an article today, I don't know if you saw it, Jim, that legal experts are saying he could face anywhere to 18 to 36 months incarcerated.
My thinking is he'll probably serve 18 months, make a deal for 18, have a fine, and then, maybe suspended for a year after that.
Yeah, the only way he avoids the 18 months is if that young pregnant lady becomes the young pregnant rich lady by settling out of
then
court.
There's obviously that to deal with as well, lawsuit. So now after the suspension, the UFC stripped him of his light heavyweight title as well. This was a couple days later. This kind of progressed as this week went down, and then, like you mentioned, they removed him off the UFC.com rankings in the light heavyweight division, as well as the pound for pound list. And also Reebok, who had reached an exclusive deal. Obviously, they're going to be the official outfitter for every UFC fighter, but UFC champions like Jon Jones and other stars have reached deals exclusive just for them. So obviously Jon Jones had just signed one of those, so he will no longer get that, similar to when Nike removed his deal after the Daniel Cormier thing. And obviously out of UFC 187 for his title defense against Anthony Rumble Johnson. After a day going by and what was going to happen, the UFC has tabbed the guy Jon Jones just beat. Daniel Cormier will step in for Jones at UFC 187 to take on Anthony Johnson for the undisputed light heavyweight championship. No interim tag applied to it. Now, Cormier was set to main event a card down in Louisiana on June 6th against Ryan Bader. Now, looking kind of all that, I think we're on the same page, Dave. I think the UFC did the right thing. You mentioned some of the other things that he's done kind of leading up to this. This was the final straw, and a severe punishment like this had to be done. I'm glad all this went down, and I'm kind of glad that the way we do the show once a week, all this information came out that we can kind of digest and all and talk about it instead of like trying to update while doing the show. So I was kind of thankful for that. We can kind of just digest all the stuff that's happened there. And so obviously, as I said, we agreed on the title stripping, suspension, definitely Reebok deal, all makes sense. Your thoughts on now DC stepping in against Rumble Johnson?
First things first, now the fight that I'm going to has lost its main event. So, that's not good.
Yeah, we'll get to that in just 1 second about that.
But another thing is I'll get more into it, what I think about it. But isn't that ridiculous that Phil Davis kept saying how he wanted the title shot, and now the light heavyweight division is up for grabs, and Phil Davis is in Bellator. What a bummer. Mr. Wonderful can't catch a break. But the only thing, I agree with everything that's happened. I agree with the announcing of the main event for 187. I agree with every bit of that. The only thing that I don't like is the fact that this is going to be a title fight, and these guys have 2.5 weeks to prepare. That's the only thing that I don't like. That card
they have 2.5 weeks. It's May 23rd.
Okay, 3 weeks.
Well, Cormier was training for a fight just 2 weeks later.
I guess they're training for a fight, and I understand, like, they both signed contracts and the fight's got to have to take place, or the fight's going to take place. But just from the outside looking in, Rumble's preparing to fight a guy with an 84-inch reach advantage, but he's probably stronger than Jon Jones. Now, Cormier is a guy that I think can pick up and walk across the cage with Rumble. And it's a complete change of what both guys were kind of training for. So I don't think anybody gets an advantage. Me personally, I would like to see this fight, maybe on the June pay-per-view or throw it on another one. I don't see what the rush is to immediately name, a champion. Divisions have gone.
I do, because they want to try to kind of erase Jon Jones. The sooner you can get a light heavyweight champion, the sooner you can start talking about Jon Jones as, he's technically stripped of the title, but he's technically the last light heavyweight champion. By getting a champion as quickly as possible, they can kind of hopefully get this thing quicker out, and his name won't be in the headlines as much. I think that's why they're rushed to keep the fight on that card, Dave, and to make it for a title, so they can start focusing on the new era of the light heavyweight division and not focus on Jon Jones right now.
And I mean, that makes sense. I just, when it first got announced, I was like, there's a big difference between training for Jon Jones and training for Daniel Cormier. There's a big contrast in styles right there. So, yeah, I mean, that was really my only point. But, I can see your point. I just I hope the fight is good. And if it's close, I hope maybe we get a rematch with, a little more time to prepare for each of the guys.
All right. Now, you mentioned Ryan Bader. That obviously leaves him without a main event partner. Now, Gustafsson and Glover Teixeira are already booked to main event a Fight Pass card in Berlin. OSP and Rampage are being targeted for the Nashville card. And, like you said, Phil Davis, the guy he just beat, now is in Bellator. Shogun maybe is an option. I don't know. That could possibly be up there. But a name that I'm not sure if people will know, but I think based on his performance in New Jersey, I think is actually pretty good in terms of an excitement factor. And I think kind of a young up-and-comer guy, maybe he won't be ready for a main event, maybe he won't, but I think it'd be an intriguing matchup. And I'm talking about Gian Villante.
Yeah, he should be healed and ready, and I don't think he got too big of a suspension, so he should be good to go. That could be. I mean, it could be a good fight. Is there anybody from down there, down in that neck of the woods, that would even make sense? Because Cormier is from Baton Rouge, I think, and that's why he was the main event.
Right.
Not that I can think of right off the top.
The only other possibility is I don't know if Rashad Evans is any close to a comeback.
I thought I heard third quarter, so like November.
Okay.
Like October, November. But hey, maybe they'll just bump up Brian Ebersol to the main event.
Yeah. Or what they'll do is just find a new main event and move Bader against somebody else. Like they'll find another suitable main event that was going to be for maybe another card like in June and just move it up. That might be a likely scenario. Or we talked about this a couple weeks ago after, actually probably about a month ago, a little over a month ago, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, we mentioned maybe she'd be a good main event for the Chicago card. We were talking about it kind of leaves her in limbo. Maybe there's a possibility that they put her title fight on Fox Sports 1.
That isn't a half bad idea.
That's a great way to get her publicity on free TV. The only thing is we talked about, shortage of contenders. Obviously the fight is, June 6th. That's about 5 weeks away. Who would they tab? Would she be ready in 5 weeks? So, there's some outside options, but obviously their more immediate concern, like I said, I think was trying to move forward with the light heavy division and worry about Ryan Bader and the card in Louisiana, next week, perhaps. Yeah.
Speaking of the 115-pound division, did you happen to see the news that the Karate Hottie has been signed to the UFC? Did you see that?
Yes, and obviously I think it was going to happen sooner or later. When we had her on the show, Dave, I kind of mentioned that, and she was like, it's something that now it's in the UFC I've been thinking about, so I had a feeling that sooner or later she was going to make that jump. The only thing I don't like, though, is she was probably going to get signed by the UFC sooner or later. I would have liked to seen her take one fight in Invicta at 115 just to kind of test herself.
Right.
And then go on to the UFC. But maybe that's semantics.
No, it's the same thing that they're trying to do with Cyborg, make sure she can at least attempt to get the weight. So, no, that would make complete sense.
And I think it helps build up Invicta if you put her in the main event 115 against someone else, and you can build like, well, this is going to be her last fight before she goes to the UFC. So that might build some intrigue for an Invicta card and build intrigue for their streaming platform known as Fight Pass.
Absolutely. Hey, how much do you think this is worth now, Jim?
I think a lot of Jon Jones stuff went down in value.
Bummer.
Went down in value, unfortunately. So, yes, the Karate Hottie's in there. And, yeah.
Speaking of hotties, Jim. Speaking of hotties, I don't know if you're following your Twitter as we're recording the PM version of Beyond the Cage, but our good friend Ray Flores. Yes, I just called him a hottie, but Ray Flores is the man. I just saw this via Twitter and Instagram. Big news. I will be on ESPN's First Take tomorrow morning right here in Las Vegas. Check it out on ESPN2 at 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 Central. So look for friend of Beyond the Cage, Ray Flores, on First Take tomorrow morning.
Good deal. And also, if you missed it, it was on the audio version of last week's podcast as well. It's now a standalone video on right here on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Beyond the Cage podcast. I got a chance to talk with the Funk Master, Aljamain Sterling, about his latest win. That was UFC on Fox 15, where he submitted Take Mizugaki with that off-the-back arm triangle choke. So he had a lot of fun talking to him. I think you'll have fun listening to it if you haven't checked it out already. So I believe it's, as of right now, our front trailer, as they call it, on our YouTube channel. So definitely check that out.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's move on to UFC 186 this past weekend. Before we get to the main card, Dave, I want to real quickly kind of go over the undercard. Our good friend of the show, Randa Marcos, who we've had on the show before, we'll try to get her on again here. She defeated Aisling Daly in a unanimous decision, the first fight of the night. I thought a very impressive performance. Former Ultimate Fighter runner-up, Jessica Rakoczy, that was the Rousey Tate season. She made her strawweight debut in the UFC. She took on Valerie Latrino, and Latrino defeated her via unanimous decision. Also, a friend of the show, Joe Riggs, he fought Patrick Cote. He came up just a tad short against the hometown guy there, Cote, by unanimous decision. And then what I thought was not only a pretty good fight day, but a great submission and kind of some validation for Alexis Davis, who's already 0-2 against Sarah Kaufman. What a great armbar submission by Alexis Davis to finally get a win on Sarah Kaufman.
Yeah, the Davis Kaufman fight, that's a fight that I don't think a lot of people gave much what's the word I'm looking for, they didn't give it much, there wasn't a whole lot of pub behind it, and both of those girls are right there in the top 5 in the division, and any of those victories, or a victory from either one of those girls, it gets them right there in that conversation. It'd be a hard argument to say why shouldn't one of them fight Kat to be the number 1, or why shouldn't they be right up there? And then, like you said, Alexis Davis, she wasn't. She was down in the fight, but no, wait, did I write that? Yeah, I had it 10-9 after the first round, and then she took full advantage, got the submission, and I'm telling you, man, both women's divisions are heating up. There's matchups to be made all over the place. There's all sorts of stuff going on good in both of the women's divisions.
Let's get to the main card of the evening, where Thomas Almeida took on Yves Joboy in the first fight. Excuse me, first fight of the evening in the bantamweight division. And this kid, Thomas Almeida, Dave, he had a great performance over Tim Gorman in his home state of Brazil to stay undefeated. Then he takes on, a very tough and dangerous striker in Yves Joboy in his home country, and just puts on a show. I mean, Joboy landed some strikes of his own as well, but Almeida, man, this guy might be the next big thing here in the bantamweight division, as he was able to dispatch Joboy in the first round And I believe it was a big straight right, Dave, that kind of signaled the beginning of the end for Joe Boy about 3:30 into the round or so. And Almeida just pounced on him, and the referee had to come in and stop it officially at 4:18. And like I mentioned, we just talked to Aljamain Sterling. I think him and Almeida would be a great fight coming up this summer. But he is a kid that is definitely on the rise, and definitely has some good striking skills. And I think in the Tim Gorman fight also showed some pretty solid grappling skills as well. So this is a kid to look out for.
Yeah, Almeida's definitely a force to be reckoned with at 135 pounds. When I saw the fight, when I kept seeing Almeida and Joe Buen, I kept thinking that Thomas Almeida, the way that he was starting out and with his striking techniques, it reminded me of Alan Joe Buen. Not Yves Joe Buen, Alan Joe Buen, the guy from down in New Orleans. They both have similar striking. They were both very devastating with their striking. And, the Aljamain Sterling fight against Almeida is a fight that I think would be I think that makes sense to book that fight. Both of those guys are forces to be reckoned with at 135, and it gives one of them a chance to move up into that next echelon of talent. So, great performance from Almeida.
The next fight of the evening was at 155 pounds originally, but then moved to a catchweight due to the late replacement fill-in Shane Campbell as he took on John McDessie. And I think Campbell, Dave, best guy he's ever fought in his career. Short notice, catchweight. I think he showed some signs that he could be good for the UFC, maybe beat some guys. But I think taking on a guy like that on short notice, excuse me, I'm sorry, with the type of skill Madessi has, again, hometown guy, hard battle for Shane Campbell. And I think Madessi, he was just able to kind of keep that striking to his advantage. He was able to get inside pretty easily after the first couple minutes and just put it right to Shane Campbell, who, I think was just a little off. I don't think he was 100%, had to come in, didn't do the full training camp and all that. And McDessie took advantage of it and finished him in the first round.
Yeah, one thing, Campbell kept trying to get up. You're in a tough spot, but he kept trying to get up and keep going. But McDessie just kept, laying punches. He was going all over the place, punches and kicks, body shots, head shots, everything. They kept saying McDessie'd been out for over a year, almost a year and a half, I believe. And, he came back with a vengeance in that fight. Never really understood McDessie, like kind of where he's at within the division. Obviously, he still got it. You'd like to see him fight a guy with a full camp and all that kind of stuff. But, went in there, took care of business, got the win, and I believe he was one of the performance of the nights. So he took home $50,000. So all in all, a good night for the Canadian.
Actually, Almeida got a performance of the night, and obviously Mighty Mouse, and then the fight of the night was Laprise and Barberina.
Fair enough.
So, but he was definitely in the running for one. All right, the next fight of the evening was in the middleweight division, Michael Bisping against CB Dalloway. And this fight, Dave, went pretty much how I thought it would be. Michael Bisping would be able to stop Dalloway from taking him down, and when it played out on the feet, really short of CB catching him with something heavy, which he did a couple of times, I don't think he would be able to stand with Michael Bisping, and the numbers kind of back that up. The first round pretty close, 23-22 in terms of total strikes in favor of Bisping, but I probably would have gave that round to Dalloway. And then rounds 2 and 3, not only the conditioning, but I think just the overall striking skill Bisping just showed off in rounds 2 and 3 has combined in those 2 rounds. He outstruck him. That would be 57-27 in the final 2 rounds. He did get taken down twice, but didn't stay on his back long. Overall, Dalloway was 2 for 8 on takedowns and got outstruck for the whole fight, 80-49. And while Bisping was definitely in trouble, I think this is one of the few times where Bisping's been rocked but didn't get finished. If you kind of look back at some of Bisping's losses where he has got knocked out, if he gets rocked, he ends up getting finished. This is one of the few fights where he got rocked and didn't stay down. So I don't know if that's luck. I don't know if that's skill or just maybe he's learned to recover better. I'm not really sure. But if he did what he normally does, Dalloway could have finished that fight in the first round, but he was able to persevere that and use his superior technique to get the win.
Yeah, Bisping in his post-fight interview, he said that he got hit and he dropped, and he was like, "What am I doing here? I don't even understand what's happening." And he was able to get back up. And my takeaway from the fight is, like you said, he was able to persevere through the fight, able to, he got knocked down, he came back, was able to win the fight. There's no question that was the right decision, that Bisping wins the fight. And I was actually surprised at how kind of humble he was after the fight, saying that he realizes that he's getting older and he's got a short time, but he wants to fight for that belt. Oh, boy. He wants to fight for that belt, and, he wants to fight. He didn't call anybody out, but he wants to fight somebody who's going to get him closer to Weidman or Belfort. And, one thing he's going to do is he's going to put his hard hat on, grab his lunch pail, and come to work, and that's what he did again Saturday night.
The co-main event of the evening marked the re-return to the UFC of Quentin Rampage Jackson as he took on Fabio Maldonado, or Maldababo, however you want to pronounce it, in a catchweight bout due to the late nature of this fight. Of course, we talked about the injunction with Bellator and stuff last week, and how he just got back on the card just in time. Steve Bossy was tabbed to be the replacement against Maldonado, but obviously they much rather have Rampage Jackson fight at the card, so he was able to come in, and I think because of the little layoff he had there, the stress, the whole thing about the situation, whether or not, how long he was going to have to wait to fight again in the UFC and all that, I got to admit, I thought Rampage performed pretty well, and I thought he showed off a versatile form of striking, not just his normal, hooks and uppercuts. And those were certainly there, but he showed off some great kicks and some good knees as well. That was probably what I was most impressed with. And a guy that, maybe did look a little tired, but I still thought performed pretty well, like I said, considering all that. And he still put up, this is just thrown, Dave, 230 strikes in those 15 minutes. That's a lot. Normally if Rampage throws 230, somebody probably got knocked out by then. So you got to give Maldonado a lot of credit for being able to, take that. Now, obviously, only 114 landed, but considering how those shots that he took, especially some of those. I mean, he had the vintage hooks and uppercuts down, and I think that's when, if Rampage lands those are the shots that usually end the fight. But I thought he showed a variety of different skills. Now for Maldonado, obviously, you were already thinking Rampage Jackson has kind of moved on from your vision. You were already starting to make plans for Steve Bossy. Now he's back. Maybe that changed. Maybe it didn't. It changed his mindset. But regardless of the case, Dave, Maldonado did not look very good. I thought he looked pretty lethargic. He had some decent combinations. But I think for the most part, Dave, he just kind of was hanging in there. It didn't really look like he wanted to be in there with Rampage Jackson. And he just kind of hung around for 15 minutes. He really didn't do anything, in my opinion, to really try to win a round or, desperately try to get a finish, especially by the time it got to the final round.
Yeah. Who was it? Dominic Cruz said on the Fox Sports 1 post-fight show that Maldonado seemed to be doing everything right. He was setting Rampage up to land a big shot, but he never threw a big shot. He would get his attention away and get ready to throw, I think he said a right cross. He was getting ready to, unleash a big punch, but then he never threw it. He kept getting him set up, and Rampage would kind of move to the other side, and he would get ready to throw it, but it never happened. And, you're not going to knock out Rampage throwing one at a time. And I think the same thing is true for Maldonado. Was very impressed with Rampage. what did he throw? 4 head kicks? When's the last time that happened?
Yeah, and how many knees he thrown? He also usually doesn't do that as well.
Yeah. I won't say a supreme mixed martial artist, but a well-rounded mixed martial artist was what Rampage looked like on Saturday. And if he keeps improving, and like in his post-fight interview, he said that he was doing 6-minute rounds. I mean, if Rampage is still standing and breathing, he's always in a fight. He's got the ability to send you to the canvas. And unfortunately, we didn't get to see it Saturday night, but he was victorious nonetheless.
Let's get to the main event of the evening for the UFC flyweight title as Mighty Mouse took on Kaiji Horiguchi, and this ended up being his 6th successful title defense and just a continuance of domination and utter control of the UFC flyweight division as he outstruck his opponent 149-61 and also took him down 14 times out of 22 attempts, including 5 of 5 in the final frame, which led to a late transition armbar, getting Horiguchi to tap just 1 second before the final bell. And like we mentioned, net himself $50,000 extra on top of a win bonus and pay-per-view buys. Now, this wasn't the most exciting Mighty Mouse performance, Dave. Now, he did get the finish. He got that at the end that kind of raises the level of the performance. But in my opinion, when this thing got to the 3rd round, and Horiguchi was definitely significantly slower, I think he was already kind of mentally beat down. I hate to really rag on Mighty Mouse because we really built him up, leading up to this fight. But did it feel to you as all that he was just toying with Horiguchi, that he could have finished this way sooner than 1 second before the final bell? Because that's kind of the sense I got, and he just didn't do it. And maybe that's why fans don't like him. I don't know, but dominant performance nonetheless. But it did feel like he could have finished this a lot sooner than he did.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't want to think that he was toying with him, because I feel like that's when someone's going to get caught. I don't know. Maybe not toying, but working on other things against him because he knew he was in a safe spot. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. I don't know. But, Mighty Mouse looked good. And once again, Dominic Cruz on point with the post-fight analysis. And I didn't even realize it as the fight was happening. But if you look at it, he says that Horiguchi could have had a little more success had he been able to throw an uppercut. Because as Mighty Mouse was chasing, he never once threw an uppercut to let him know that it was there. And that's something that, hopefully whoever's going to fight him, maybe it's John Dodson next, keeps an eye on that if Mighty Mouse is going forward, throw that uppercut every once in a while. Because Mighty Mouse was pushing the pace and he was going forward. And when he felt like it, he could just snag the takedown. How many takedowns did you say he had?
14.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Now, one thing that could have been the cause of that, either he doesn't like to throw the uppercut, or 2, he landed a couple of good knees, Dave, while Mighty Mouse was rushing in. And Joe Rogan says this several times. Once you kind of land a big strike or big combination, sometimes you just kind of seek out that combination instead of letting it come naturally and throwing other stuff. And that maybe was the case with Horiguchi. He landed a couple nice knees and thought, all right, maybe I can finish him with a knee. And maybe the thought of an uppercut didn't come up because he was maybe more focused on that.
Very well may have. But, hey, it was kind of cool to see a finish at 4:59, and it was kind of cool to see, he right now to me, it's a hard argument to say he's not the number 1 pound for pound fighter in the UFC. The list has changed.
Yeah, even if Jon Jones was still on there, I think easily you can put Mighty Mouse in the top 3.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
The guy's incredible. Like I said, I don't want to take away from his victory or anything and, saying like, oh, it's that easy to finish guys, or, take credit away from Horiguchi, because obviously I thought he held in there tough, against the guy that I don't think he was ready to face. I thought he held up admirably, but definitely, as we said, was not ready for Mighty Mouse yet. But with a short list of contenders, he kind of had to. So he's kind of waiting for Dodson Makovsky, and the winner of that probably faces him next. If it ends up being Dodson and he defeats Dodson, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Like, that's the division. I really don't know who else like rises up. You know, I think he has, like, the UFC has to force him to 35. Like, I don't know. There's no one can touch this guy.
Yeah, it may be time for him to 135, try to avenge the only loss to Cruz. I mean, that may be where we're at,
And what I think would be cool, Dave, because he has dominated the division so long, instead of having the UFC have him vacate the title, he should be able to keep his title and fight for the 135 title. And if he wins it, the way he's been dominating 125, he can reasonably defend both titles at the same time, because obviously they're way short on contenders of that division, and that could be a possibility. He could be the first dual title holder in the UFC at the same time, I should say.
Yeah, it's what's the word? It's surprising that if you think of all the great fighters who have been in the UFC and who, man, Chuck Liddell could probably win at 205 and 280 or 185, or Jones could do 205 and 265. And, you never really would have thought that Mighty Mouse might actually be the guy to hold 2 consecutive belts. Mighty Mouse beating whoever the 135-pound champ is at that time would not be surprising to me.
And also, we said, if a rival, so to speak, can't rise up to draw intrigue to Mighty Mouse, I think holding 2 titles at the same time definitely draws intrigue. How can you not want to watch that guy if he's the champion in 2 classes at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and if 100%. The UFC was going to allow anyone to do it, I think it's him.
Yep.
All right. Any final thoughts here, Dave, before we end the show?
Yeah, I mean, just make sure you check out our buddy Ray on ESPN's First Take. That'll be pretty cool. Maybe he'll give us a Beyond the Cage shout out. Throw up
gosh.
The BTC.
What time does he do it?
9.
Oh man, I don't think he will. But if you text him, just kind of do it jokingly, like, Beyond the Cage. Like, if he somehow threw that in there, that would be incredible. He doesn't have to, but I'm saying, he'll probably, he said it as a joke, like, hey, it would be funny if you mentioned our podcast on air, LOL. He might, obviously this is a big deal for him. I don't want him to mess up any future thing, but that would be pretty crazy.
Yeah, as he's talking, they, well, what do you think about this? Well, normally I'm an MMA guy, but sometimes I like to go beyond the cage, and that would be awesome.
All right, well, he is the Juice, Dave Sadler. You can follow him on Twitter at VigilanteJuice. I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. Again, sorry for the coughing. I did the best I could. I'm trying to get over a little bit of a cold and cough here, so hopefully by next week you won't have to hear me cough or stutter or read things weird or take pauses or anything. So hopefully I'll return to my old normal self for next week. And very similar to this week, we're probably going to do another night show, probably around the same time period, just to give you a heads up.
Oh, yeah. That's just where we'll be.
All right. For the Juice, Dave Sadler, I'm your host, Jim Graham, and thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.